Hello everyone, welcome to this episode on the 172nd Air Wing. I thought it best to take a couple of moments out of our somewhat busy lives and talk a little bit about the F-110A. So, if this is your first video or first time watching one of my videos, I should say, please check out the other ones on my channel talking about various models, 1/72nd scale of course, and some of the history behind the aircraft models and the story of the real world aircraft. So I feel like the human story is worth capturing, and sometimes it gets lost in discussion on airplanes and specs and things like that. So thank you for patronizing the channel, and I hope you stick around and watch more of my features. So to the subject at hand, this is an F-110A, which is probably a point of confusion for many of you right now because you're thinking this looks an awful lot like an F-4 Phantom II. Well, I'll explain that. And that's why I'm doing this video. I was originally just going to do a showcase video because I have talked about the F-4 Phantom in previous episodes, like the one I did on Robin Old's F-4C and Operation Bolo. So if you have the time, I definitely recommend you check that video out to get some more historical background on the Phantom service, especially in Vietnam. But this is a unique case that I wanted to explain a little bit because I figured if I just put this video out there, it wouldn't be clear what this is because it is a Phantom and is also not. And I can't really explain that visually. So here's the story, and this is based on several information sources that I've looked at. So if something doesn't add up in your estimation, please reach out in the comment section below and add your 2 cents on the situation or the question that you have. That's how we all get better, right? None of us are born with all the knowledge in the world. We interact with each other and we learn more from it. So please send your feedback if you find a piece of information worth sharing regarding this historical artifact in front of us. So, the F-110. So, the story actually starts with a guy that most people probably don't like very much, and that is the Secretary of Defense known as Robert S. McNamara. Now, his name is attached to a lot of very ugly things in U.S. history, most of them involving the Southeast Asian conflict in Vietnam and some of the decisions made there. But this happens to be an example of one of his better decisions in historical analysis. So in the early 1960s, he was working for John F. Kennedy, and one of the objectives that McNamara had was reforming how the U.S. military bought things, because basically whenever the U.S. Air Force and the U.S. Navy wanted airplanes, they always went about it with their own separate contracts, evaluations, etc., etc. And Robert McNamara was one of the first secretaries of defense in modern times to look at that approach and decide that it was time to combine some aspects of what the services were buying. So instead of having an Air Force airplane and a Navy airplane, maybe one of the service branches should use the other ones. And this is the first instance in the modern world of what we know today as joint projects, meaning an aircraft developed by multiple service branches in the modern era with modern electronics, technology, and so forth. And this is, today we look at the Joint Strike Fighter and the F-35 and all that, and you know, it doesn't seem too weird that the Air Force and the Marines and the Navy would work together to make an airplane. But there was a period of time where that kind of thing was not done and very different from the norm. And this example in front of us is part of how that revolution came to happen in how the military does things. So essentially in 1962, the U.S. Air Force was looking to get a new tactical fighter, and Robert McNamara looked at the budget for how much it was going to cost and basically went, no way in hey, this ain't gonna happen. We need to find a more cost-effective solution. And so he went on his principle of encouraging commonalities. So the choice that he offered the Air Force was they need to either buy the A-4 Skyhawk from the Navy or the F-4 Phantom from the Navy. Now, as far as General Curtis LeMay, he was the chief of staff at the time, as far as he was concerned, apparently, he wanted neither, but he wasn't in a position to argue, and at the time, the F-4 was the best performing U.S. Tactical fighter platform by far. And this was borne out in multiple comparisons that this particular aircraft had against the F-106, the F-105, and of course the F-100. So in the areas of payload, range, air-to-air capability, and so on and so forth, top speed, etc., the F-4 Phantom won out over all of those. So in this competition, the Navy's F-4B became the Air Force's new airplane. Now, of course, this brings to mind something else about that era that has changed, and it is the Tri-Service Aircraft Designation System, otherwise known as why we call the F-22 the F-22. Okay, so believe it or not, there was a period of time where the Air Force and the Navy had different numbering systems. So in 1962, when Robert McNamara directed that the Air Force buy the U.S. Navy's F-4B Phantom, the Air Force did so, but they renamed it, and this is where we get the F-110 right here on the side, because being an Air Force airplane, the Air Force people were like, we're not calling it an F-4, they were going to call it an F-110, because that was the numbering system that the Air Force had, right? They had the F-100, the F-101, F-102, F-10, they had an F-107, but it was a prototype that didn't go into production, but they had an F-105, F-104, in the next increment in the Century series that was available was the F-110. Now, funny story, you might be asking yourself what the F-109 and F-108 was. Well, the F-108 was a project called the Repair or something, and it didn't go anywhere, it was canceled. The F-107, same story. And the F-109 was actually a designation originally applied to what became the F-101B. So that number got used, and the next one available was F-110. So that's how this tactical fighter was called the F-110. Now, the name didn't last long, as many of you might imagine, because what happened is, and this is a story that has apparently been corroborated by several sources, but it rings apocryphal to me, but several printed sources have said that this has happened. So the details are a little different between the printed sources, but the general gist of it is Robert McNamara was in a meeting. He was talking about various airplanes that the U.S. Navy and the U.S. Air Force were flying, and the presenter flipped a slide to show Robert McNamara the U.S. Navy's F-4B Phantom II. And then he flipped to the next slide to show the Air Force's F-110A, and that's when McNamara was confused, because up until he saw a picture of the airplanes, he didn't realize that they were talking about the same exact aircraft, more or less. So this event caused him to blow his gasket, and he mandated from that day forward that the U.S. Air Force and the U.S. Navy use the same numbering system going forward, hence the Unified Tri-Service Aircraft Designation System. So now, we live in the world where the F-35 is the F-35. It doesn't matter if it's the Marine variant or the Air Force variant or the Navy variant. They were all F-35s. The difference is just the letter, right? So the B version is the one that does the jump jet Harrier thing. The C version is the one that's got the big wings and takes off and lands on aircraft carriers. The A version is the one that keeps its gun with it all the time because it's scared and it's just always prepared for trouble. But anyways, point is, in the modern world, we have this unified system because of this aircraft. And the F-110 in front of you is the first example of a multiple service aircraft being used in the modern era of missiles and tactical fighter applications and bombs and that kind of thing. So this is the story of the Phantom and how it started in the U.S. Air Force, and they weren't retired until 2016. There's actually a YouTube video available right now of the last active duty Air Force pilot, call sign Elvis, flying an F-4E in an air show. One of the F-4Es attached to the Airborne Target Squadron down at Tyndall, right? And he was flying it in 2016, and this aircraft was purchased by the Air Force in 1962. This thing is still in service to this day in 3 countries off the top of my head, and I'm sure somebody will mention a 4th that I probably forgot. So South Korea, Iran, and Turkey, they all fly them. And Greece, I almost forgot that one. Greece, all 4 of those countries fly the F-4E version, which is, of course, a bit more upgraded than the F-110 that you see in front of you. But yeah, the F4 is still in service as I make this video in 2022. So safe to say that this is one of Robert McNamara's smarter decisions, because if he hadn't have made the Air Force buy this airplane, then there wouldn't have been an F4C, then there wouldn't have been an F4D, and if there wasn't an F4D, there wouldn't have been an F4E, and the F4E is the one that has the gun built into it, the slats and some of those features, and it's the F4E that Israel used to good effect, and it's the F4E that's purchased by all those countries I named just now. So all of those stories and all of those variants and all of those countries flying the F4, it all got its start with this one right here. Thanks for watching. Leave your comments and feedback in the box below, and please consider subscribing. Thank you.